皆さんこんにちは。私はVinjamoori Anantです。アメリカから来ました。アメリカのデンバー来ました。今日ですね、大事なんだのトピックについて話しましょう。でも実は私の日本語はまだです。そして英語で話しましょう。So, good morning everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I'm looking forward to talking to you about a topic that I think is going to be very interesting to all of us because we're all here because we're interested in finding ways to promote and improve women's health.
はい、今回ですね、先ほど日本語で自己紹介してくれましたけど、アメリカでロンジビティですね、健康長寿の専門家のアナント・ビンジャムーリ先生に来ていただきまして、女性の健康にとても大事なことをお話ししていただきます。ちょっとまとめながら通訳をさせていただきます。よろしくお願いします。
So, I've had the benefit of having a lot of really valuable experiences that have brought me to this point. I had the chance to train with some of the smartest doctors in the world at Harvard Medical School, and then I also had the opportunity to learn about how to apply what I've learned in the business world at Harvard Business School.
ハーバードという、日本でもすごく有名なところで世界の頭のいい方たちがたくさん集まる医学部をご卒業されてビジネススクールの方もハーバードで修了されています。
After finishing my medical training, I then spent a lot of time in the world of business trying to figure out how I can improve healthcare. And one of the most important experiences I had was being the chief medical officer of the first anti-aging longevity clinic in the United States. And this was a company called Modern Age. We raised over $40 million and built one of the first experiences that was accessible to the broad population that related to preventative health.
はい、学校を卒業した後ですね、ビジネスをたくさん経験してきましたと。で、すごく一番大きな経験としてはモダンエイジというこの3つ目に書いてありますところですね。アメリカのスタートアップですけれども、この健康長寿の領域で全米でクリニックを展開をしようとしたスタートアップになりまして、40ミリオン4000万ドルなので、4000万ドルだから50億円ぐらいですかね、はい、を資金調達をしたんですけれども、そこの経験を生かしてですね、はい、今日本でもロンジビティで何かお手伝いができないかと来日をしてくれました。
And so now after having this experience, my goal is to now take everything I've learned about longevity medicine and spread it around the world. And over the last year, I've developed a very strong interest in Japan and Japanese culture. And I have a strong interest in helping to empower people who are in this space to work in this field and to build businesses in this field.
はい、でこのロンジビティのフィールドでですね、健康長寿の領域で、ご自身の経験を生かして何かお手伝いができないかと。そして、去年くらいからすごく日本に興味を持ってくれて、You study about Japanese from the last year ですね。
はい、はい、1年ぐらい勉強しました。
日本語も勉強してこうして来日をしてくれています。
And in addition to this, I also advise some of the top companies in the space.including Hrhealth, which is the largest provider of menopause care in the world, and Superpower, which is an interesting company focused on making longevity care accessible to young people.
はい、で今ですね、今はHrhealthといって、アメリカですごく大きなスタートアップですけれども、更年期に特化したスタートアップですとか、あとスーパーパワーというロンジビティを広げようとしているスタートアップのアドバイザーもされています。
Okay. And so these are just some photos of Modern Age. We had a beautiful clinic in New York City, and we actually served a lot of women. The majority of our patients, about 80%, were women, many of whom were in menopause or in midlife. And so a lot of the topics that we just heard Sensei talk about were actually very relevant to what we did.
はい、でこれはですねニューヨークのモダンエイジのクリニックのすごく素敵な写真になりますが、患者さんいらっしゃってくださる患者さんの8割は女性で、そして更年期の年代の方が多いということで、その更年期の女性に何をしてあげるといいかっていうところを研究されてきたというところになります。はい。
And so what I want to do to introduce this topic of women's health is to first just talk a little bit about what the reality of how health unfolds is. And I know this slide probably seems overwhelming, so I'll just say one thing, which is that our health actually unfolds through our cells. Whether we're talking about our brain or our liver or our skin, everything is composed of cells. And what happens to cells is what makes us age or have disease or problems. And so this is the future of medicine. We're going to start thinking about things in terms of cells instead of body parts.
はい。で、すごくちょっとビジな内容の多いスライドですけれども、症状からシグナリングへと書いてありますが、細胞のシグナル伝達というのがやっぱりすごく大事だと。なので、そういったところに注目をして将来の医療というのを作っていきたいというところです。はい。
And so one of the things that I really believe in is that if this is the future of medicine, we need to start organizing how we think about things through the lens of cells. And so this is a framework that I've come up with to help us do this. And honestly, it's going to be hard to explain all of this framework in one slide. So the point here is to understand that we need to change how we think about health and disease. We have to change how we think and move away from body parts and this way of thinking that's been around for almost 100 years and bring us into a new way of thinking.
はい。で、この複雑なメカニズムをですね、フレームワークという形で標準化をしようとしているところですけれども、もともと体のパーツで考えていたところですけれども、それを体のパーツでも100年以上考えてきたけれども、そうではなくて細胞と細胞のシグナリングというところで考え方を変えていく必要があるということで、このフレームワークを作られたということになります。
And so this is just more information about the slide, about the framework. But what I want to spend more time on is actually what I think most of you are most interested in, which is what is the top 5, right? That's probably what most people are wondering about. But it's important to know that what helped me come up with those top 5 was, yes, my clinical experience, but also this framework.
はい、でこちらに書いてあるのがですね5つの大事なポイントになります。でご自身のご経験からですね、そしてフレームワークから出てきた5つのポイントを、書かせていただいています。
And so one of the first things I believe in when it comes to improving health is measuring. You know, in America we have a saying that you can't improve what you don't measure. So one of the first steps we need to take is making sure that we are measuring the right markers of health. And now I know that in Japan, actually, there is a more strong culture already of measuring. I know about the Ningen Doc system, which is very good and something that we don't have. I wish we had in America. But I think there's an opportunity to build on that even further. And I think this actually illustrates why I think Japan is such an interesting place for the future of longevity medicine. And so on this slide, I have a list of some of the biomarkers that I like to measure when it comes to health and longevity for both men and women. And importantly, all of these biomarkers come from this framework that is based on how cells act and how they change over time.
はい。でやっぱりまずはですね測定をして状態を知るということが大事だということでそちらのですね何を測定をするかというところをこちらに挙げてくださっています。で日本はですねすごく、測定をするということに関してですね、とても人間ドックもあって先進的な国だと思ってらっしゃって、それで日本に注目をされています。ですいません日本語のちょっと翻訳が消えてしまったのですが、このスタンダードバイオマーカーと書かれているところに、何を測定するかというのをそれぞれの5つの大事なポイントに対して書いてくださっています。
Yeah, you could probably just take a picture, send it to ChatGPT. That's what I do.
チャット 写真撮っていただいて大丈夫なので、もしよければ撮っていただいて、チャット GPT にちょっともし、はい、よければ解説を聞いていただけるといいかもしれません。
And so this is a list of what I believe are the 5 most important interventions for women's health. And so we'll talk in more detail about each one of these things. Some of these things I know that Sensei just talked about in the last presentation, especially about hormones and how we need to be aware of them. But some of them might be new. And so we want to spend some time talking about this. And so this comes from my clinical experience. It comes from my analysis of the literature using this framework, and also my experience talking to experts around the world who are also doing this type of work. And so, of course, this is ultimately my opinion, but it comes from a place of experience and a structured way of thinking about it.
はい、でこちらがですね、ミッドライフと書いてありますので、中年期以降の女性にですね、大事な5つのインターベンション介入について書かれています。でこれはですね、アナント先生ご自身のご経験もそうですし、世界のロンジビティのネットワークの専門家の方たちからのインプット、そしてご自身で論文なんかをですね解析されて導き出した5つのものになります。で先ほど10時半からのプレゼンテーションで女性の健康総合センターの松原先生もホルモンのお話なんかもされていましたが、いくつかちょっとね新しいポイントがあると思うので、そこを中心にお話ししたいと思います。
So the first topic I want to talk about is the importance of resistance training, especially for women. And this may be surprising because a lot of people think about resistance training. And when I say resistance training, I mean like lifting weights. Most people think about that as, oh, that's only for men. And in fact, that's not true. And in fact, it probably is even more important for women. And that's for a couple of reasons. The first being that women have, unfortunately, a higher risk of osteoporosis. And resistance training is one of the most effective ways at preventing that. And the second reason is that resistance training helps us to build muscle, which is ultimately what we need to age the way that we want, right? If we think about being able to be active, lift up our grandchildren, go skiing, whatever you want to do, you need to have muscle to do that. So I think this is one thing that is very important and everyone can do it.
はい、最初はですねレジスタンストレーニングということで、負荷をかけたトレーニングですね。で多くの方はもしかしたら男の人がされるものじゃないかなと思われるかもしれないんですけど、実は女の人でこそ大事なのがこの負荷をかけたトレーニングになります。でその理由としては、一つは女性はやっぱり骨粗しょう症のリスクが高いですね。それを予防するためにこの負荷をかけたトレーニング大事ですし、2つ目はやっぱり筋肉の維持強化というところで、お孫さんを抱っこするとかスキーをするとか何をするにもやっぱり動けるというのはとても大事ですので、この負荷をかけたトレーニングをまず一つ目に挙げています。
And I will just say that ideally you would go to a gym and work with a trainer and do what are called compound exercises, which are basically squats, deadlifts, or overhead presses. But you don't have to do that, right? You can do exercises with just your own body weight. You can do body weight squats. You can do exercises lifting up weights that you can buy on Amazon. And that will honestly go a long way. So don't let the fact that you don't have a gym, because I know that gyms are not as common here as America. So don't let that stop you. There's very simple ways to do it. And even a little bit can go a long way. I think the important thing is just to get started.
はい、でジムに行ってもちろんトレーナーさんに教えてもらって取り組んでいただくのがもちろんいいですけれども、なかなかそういうことも日本はアメリカよりもジムがね少ないってことも理解をされていまして、それも難しいと思うので、ご自身の体重で、ご自身のできる時にスクワットとかですね、そういう筋トレをしていただく、まずはスタートをしていただくというところがとても大事ですというところです。
And so the next intervention I want to talk about is actually nutrition. And to be honest with you, I think this is one where I think in Japan, people already mostly get it right, and you don't have some of the problems that we have in America and other parts of the world. And so this might be the one intervention that already you're doing. But the point here is to have a diet that emphasizes a lot of plants and to not have too much fat and to have enough protein, but not so much. And I think my sense is that Japan actually already naturally does this. You know, having rice with fish and some vegetables is like honestly a perfect meal. And so I don't think you need to change anything, but maybe I would just say that because American things go everywhere, like McDonald's, 7-Eleven, all these things, they're coming, they're already here. You know, don't lose these beautiful nutritional traditions that you already have.
はい、で2つ目はですね、食事栄養のことですね。植物ベースの食事を積極的に摂りましょうというところですけども、日本は日本食もねいろいろ食べていただいていますけれども、もしかしたらすでにできていることかもしれませんと。で植物、野菜とかねそういったものを中心に食べていただいて、脂質は控えめに、そしてタンパク質も摂りすぎないというところがポイントだとおっしゃっています。でなので日本はもしかしたらもうすでにクリアしていることかもしれませんけれども、ぜひマクドナルドとかアメリカンな食事に負けずにその日本のいい食事を維持してくださいと、はい、おっしゃっています。
And so this third intervention is probably the most surprising and maybe controversial, but this comes from a place of studying the science myself, but then also talking to other experts around the world who are looking at these GLP-1 receptor agonists like Ozempic or Wegovy or Mounjaro. And the remarkable thing about these drugs is that originally they were introduced for diabetes and then to lose weight. But when we look at what's happening to people when they take these drugs is that so many different things are getting better. Their risk of heart disease is getting better. Their risk of kidney disease is getting better. Their cholesterol is improving. Inflammation is improving. Their brain is improving in terms of addictions, in terms of risk of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Nearly every disease of aging seems to improve with these.
はい、これがですね一番ちょっと議論のあるところかと思いますが、ご自身の研究からもですねこれがすごく大事だというふうにおっしゃっています。これGLP-1 アゴニストというお薬、もともと糖尿病用に開発をされて、最近ダイエットにも使われているようなお薬になりますけれども、これがそれ以上の効果を持っていて心臓病のリスクを減らすですとか、あと脳の健康を保つですとか、そういう本当にいろんな効果を持っているということが分かってきていると。
So I predict, and you can quote me on this, but I predict that GLP-1s will be the first drugs that are known in the world to be anti-aging drugs because of all of this information that's coming out about them. But I recognize that these are also expensive and hard to get. So I think that of all the things we're talking about today, this is probably the least important right now, but I think it's very important to pay attention because I do think these are going to be a big part of the future of medicine. They have already changed the game in such big ways, and I think this is only going to continue.
はい、GLP-1 アゴニスト、このお薬はですねすごく大事でそのアンチエイジングの基本となっているようなお薬になりますが、値段が高かったりとかなかなか入手ができなかったりとかいうところもあって、もしかしたら今優先順位としては一番低いかもしれないけれども、ぜひ皆さん頭に置いておいていただいて覚えておいていただけるといいと思います。
And I'll just say one last thing about these is that the way in which we use them for kind of anti-aging purposes is different from how we use them for weight loss or diabetes. And we don't yet know the exact best way to do this, but we have some ideas based on some initial experience. And the idea is to do this thing called microdosing, which means that you take a very low dose of the drug, much lower than you otherwise would take.
はい、で例えば糖尿病とかその原料ですね、ダイエットに使うのとはまた違う形でそのアンチエイジングには使うということが言われていますが、まだ実はアンチエイジングでどうやって投与していくのがいいかっていうところは分かっていないところではありますが、一つ分かってきていることとしては、すごくその投与量を少なくして、マイクロドーズと言ってますけれども、すごく少なくして投与していくっていうところがいいんじゃないかと言われています。
And if anyone would like to talk more about this or any other topic, please come find me or send me an email, as you'll get that information at the end.
はい、今日ですねこの会場にずっといらっしゃいますので、ぜひこの辺のお話をもっと聞きたい方がいらっしゃいましたら見つけて声をかけていただいてもいいですし、チラシもお配りしてますので、ぜひご連絡をいただければと思います。
And so number 4 is actually something that builds on what Sensei talked about in the last presentation, which is the importance of supporting hormones for women. And so she already did an amazing job of talking about how these change and why they're important. And so I think what we need to start to do is find ways to support hormonal health for women as they get older. And now one very common and useful way to do it is through the use of hormone replacement therapy, specifically estrogen and progesterone, and testosterone as well, which I'll talk about in a second. But these are things that can be tremendously beneficial when it comes to reducing the risk of osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, and most importantly, improving how people feel. Because if women can't sleep, if they can't think clearly, if they don't have energy, they can't do all those other things that we talked about, the resistance training, eating the right foods. You can't do that if you don't have energy, if you're not sleeping well. So this is important. I mean, one analogy I often say with my patients is that, giving hormones for women are like water for a plant. So we have to think about this very carefully.
こちらはですね10時半からの松原先生のセッションでもすでにご紹介をされていたところになりますけれども、HRT ですね、ホルモン補充療法というのもとても大事ですと。エストロゲンとプロゲステロンというのを補充をする方法ですけれども、もちろん骨粗しょう症のリスクを減らすとか、心臓病のリスクを減らすとかいうところもありますが、女性を元気にするというところですかね。先ほどご紹介したようなトレーニングとか、食事の改善に関してもエネルギーがなければできないというところなので、女性にホルモンを与えるということはですね、植物に水を与えるぐらい大事なことで、それがエッセンシャルになって、女性は他の対策も行動ができるようになるんじゃないかとおっしゃっています。
And so the last recommendation that I have is actually still a hormone, but it's actually one that a lot of people don't think about, and that is testosterone. Again, a lot of people think testosterone is for men only, and we don't want to have high testosterone. We want to lower it. But actually that's not true. And when you look at how testosterone levels change, the drop in testosterone levels actually happens earlier than estrogen and progesterone. It happens for many women around their mid-30s or early 40s. And testosterone is very important for muscle, which we talked about why that's important. It's important for mood and cognitive function. And so it is very, very important for us to support and maintain. And just like with estrogen, you should work with an expert to help you find the best way to support your hormones.
はい、でもう一つですね、最後になりますが、これもやはりホルモンになりますけれども、こちらはですねテストステロンというホルモンですね。でよく聞くのは男性ホルモンとして聞かれると思っています。男性に必要なもの、女性はなんか高いレベルでは持ってない方がいいんじゃないかと思われるかもしれませんが、実はすごく女性の中でも大事な機能を果たしています。ここに書かれているような認知機能に効いていたりですとか、あと気分のところですねに効いていたりですとか、 か、まだまだすごく新しい領域にはなっていて、まだ知られていないものにはなるんですけれども、とても大事なものになります。で、実はですね、他のエストロジェンとかホルモンとプロゲステロンとか他のホルモンよりも早めに減ることが分かってきていて、30代後半ぐらいから減ってしまうので、そこをですね、相談をして、補充をするサポートをしてくれる専門家の人を見つけるのがとても大事だとおっしゃっています。
And I'll just say that one of the best ways to increase testosterone naturally without any therapies is resistance training. So again, that's why that's important.
はい、で薬とかじゃなくてテストステロンを増やす有効的な方法としてはトレーニングですね、筋トレすることがありますので、そこが一番やりやすいところかなと思います。
You can go to the next slide.
はい。
You can keep going. I will. And so today we talked about 5 very important interventions for women's health. And this is really just the start. In reality, there's so much more that you need to do to actually tailor this for patients. And there is so much more in the world of health and longevity and wellness that we haven't even had a chance to talk about. And so many people here are trying to build businesses in this space. They're building products, they're starting clinics, and doing this is very hard. I know this from experience. And so this is why I've created a mentorship program to help support people who are doing this. And in this program, I share my experience, and I share my network, and I've built a curriculum. And as I'll show in the next slide, I am very interested to expand my presence and connections in Japan. And so I invite you to join this program, and I'm offering it for free for the first year to anyone who is based in Japan, because I'm very interested to see how we can develop this exciting type of medicine in this beautiful country.
はい、で今日はですね、5つのとても大事なポイントをお伝えさせていただきましたが、このロンジビティとかアンチエイジングの領域ではもっともっとたくさんのことがありますし、例えばお一人の方に向けてカスタマイズをしていくっていうこともとても大事になってくるかと思います。でそれをですね、皆さんがそれぞれやるのはとても大変なので、アナント先生が実はそのメンターシッププログラムというのを作ってくれています。ご自身の経験とあとネットワークをベースにですね、メンターシッププログラムというのを作ってくれていまして、クリニックでこういったプログラムをご提供されたりとか、会社で新しい商品を開発されたりとか、そういったところのサポートをしていきたいと思っていますと。でお手元にも配っているんですけれども、すごく本当に日本で興味があってですね、日本でのパートナーを見つけたいという思いがありますので、1年間フリーでこのメンターシッププログラムにご参加いただけるQR コードがついていますので、ぜひご興味あったら申し込んでください。
And so you can just go to the slide with the QR code. So if people don't have the flyer, feel free to take a photo of the QR code. And I would love to support as many of you as possible in building your businesses and creating this world of longevity medicine. And I want this to be a global movement, and I think Japan has a very important place to play in that. So thank you all so much for listening. ありがとうございました。
はい、ありがとうございました。はい、もしリーフレットがない方は多分余りがあると思いますので、写真撮っていただいても大丈夫です。でこのロンジビティをですね、ぜひ世界に広げていきたいで、その中で日本はとても大事な国だと思っているということで、はい、ぜひですねつながっていただいて、つながっていただいて、この先に一緒にコラボレーションをしていただけたらなと思います。ありがとうございました。